exploring an older community in a hilly, somewhat mountainous area, and you haven't been there, but it's much like where my sister-in-law lives in the UP by Republic. It's very hilly, mountainous, but very, very beautiful, and this is a very old mining community there. Most of the houses are very old. And there were others with me. I don't know who they were. They seemed like leaders. Spiritual guardians is what, in my spirit, I knew that's what they were. They were spiritual guardians. And we were watching over the community as we walked around on this hillside and in the mountains and up and down the streets. We were watching over this community. And I observed, we have apple trees here, old apple trees. These are not old variety apple trees like the trees that I grew up with. Those trees that I grew up with, they could withstand storms. Their branches didn't bow down really. No matter how big the harvest was, those branches did not go down and touch the ground. They were sturdy. These were old order variety apple trees. And I had never seen trees that were pruned so perfectly. They were everywhere in this community. As we walked, they seemed to spring up everywhere. And these apples were just laden with fruit, heavy with fruit. Yeah. I knew that these apple trees were about to produce the harvest of a lifetime. They had been pruned so perfectly that they were going to produce the greatest harvest that they had ever given. And like I said, the branches were sturdy, and the increased apple harvest wasn't even stressing the Lynns. Everybody in the community was admiring the beautiful harvest, but no one touched the fruit. The leaders were watching over the harvest, and everyone instinctively knew the fruit was precious and not quite ready. But it was so close. The leaders that were with me, eventually we were driving in a car in the area still. It was an older, nice car. In the car, we drove up this approach into like an old fire building maybe, but it was like driving up the approach to an old barn. My grandpa's barn was like that. On the backside, you drove up it. And you went to mow the hay away, and that's what this approach was like. We drove up into this firehouse, and I knew that it was a public building. Quickly, got one more thing to add. At first, there were only 3 leaders with me, and all of a sudden, in this car, we picked up a 4th one, and we made room for them in the front seat. We went up this approach. Everyone got out of the car, and they disappeared on me. And I was in this, and they closed the garage door down. I didn't know how to get out of there, but I was holding something that I hadn't seen yet. It was a white book, and it was really big. It was a big white book. And I knew I needed to lay the book down in there because I already felt directed of the Lord where I needed to go next. And I knew that book was going to be too heavy for me to carry. So I felt led of the Lord to leave that white book in the firehouse. I found an old vehicle in there, and I laid it down, and then I noticed that they were all gone, and I'm in there alone. I didn't know how to get out. But I went over by the garage door, and it was like the metal was loose. And I was able to slip out. It separated from the frame. I was able to slip out of this garage. And the metal went back and sealed perfectly on the garage when I walked out of it. I walked down the approach, and I turned to the right, and I went up the street because that's the way the Lord was leading me to go. I just keep thinking about the stream, about how we are called to protect the harvest. We are called to protect the souls in this church. We are called to protect the souls in other churches, Christians, the harvest. The harvest is close, and it's beautiful, and it's going to be the biggest harvest that we have ever seen, because God has spent so much time pruning. I feel like I've been pruned this last year. He is pruning us because he's getting ready for a big harvest. So that was my dream that I had. This is kind of a Christmas message that I have. Kind of.